So yesterday we were taking and determining which relationships were functions, and then we were using a equation to find a range for our given domain. So today we're going to take a table of values and use that to come up with an equation that models the function. Or the book might call it a rule for the function. When they say a rule, really they just mean the equation. Now, basically what we're looking for is we want to know how we get the outputs from the inputs. So how do we get the outputs from the inputs? What are the outputs equal to in relation to the inputs? So how do I get from the top of the table to the bottom of the table? How do I get from 0 to 2 and 1 to 3 and 4 to 6 and 6 to 8 and 10 to 12? What do I do? Add 2. So my output is equal to my input plus 2. Does that make sense? Okay, because when 0 goes in, 2 comes out. 0 plus 2 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 4 plus 2 is 6. Don't just figure out for the first two numbers and assume it works for all of them. Check all of the pairs and make sure that the rule works for every single one of them. So what variable do I want to use to represent my output? What variable should we use to represent our output? Seth?
Oh, for output.
I want something more generic, like our typical equations. Yeah.
X.
No, I don't use X for my input.
Y.
Why? Because I use X for my input. I don't want to use it for my output. So what should I use for my output? What variable should I use for my output?
X.
No, we're going to use that for our input.
Oh, so we should use Y for our output.
Oh, we should use Y for our output. Why didn't you just say that, David? So we use Y to represent our output, X to represent our input. So our output is our input plus 2. That make sense? Why? There we go. Because Y is also a word. We also talk about finding your X's a lot in algebra. Which I think is weird because generally you try to avoid your X's. You ever seen that t-shirt that said, Algebra, stop asking us to find your X?
Oh,
It's not coming back and we don't know why. Yeah, it's a good one. All right, you are buying concert tickets that cost $15 each. You can buy up to 6 tickets. Write the amount in dollars you spend as a function of the number of tickets you buy. Identify the independent and dependent variables, then identify the domain and range of the function. So in this case, when we have a story behind our question, now we can use letters that would be appropriate to the situation. So we're looking at the amount of money you spend as a function of the number of tickets. So amount we spend is our output. That's what we're looking for. What letter do we want to use to represent that? Seth? A. Does that make it a Canadian problem? A? All right. The input is the number of tickets we buy. What letter do we want to use to represent the number of tickets? David? N. Okay. Thank you for not choosing Y. Okay. So the amount we spend can be represented by A, the number of tickets represented by the number N. So we've actually already done the second part here. It says identify the independent and dependent variables. The only thing we got to tie in then is which of those is independent, which of those is independent, which of those is dependent. If you're unsure, think about which depends on which. Emily?
A is dependent and N is independent.
A is dependent because the amount we spend depends on the number of tickets we buy. So A is the dependent variable, N is the independent variable. Now we need to figure out how much we're going to spend. So the amount we spend has to be equal to something. How do we find out how much money we're going to spend? If you're buying tickets to a concert, what do you do to figure out how much money you're going to spend? Sarah? Okay, what do I multiply, Sarah?
15.
Okay, but what's 15?
The cost per ticket.
Okay, so we're multiplying the cost per ticket by, you said N, which we already determined is the number of tickets. So there's our verbal model. And we can plug in the things that we know. We said that A is going to be the amount we spend. The cost per ticket is 15. And the number of tickets is N. So now we've written the amount we spend as a function of the number of tickets you buy. Now we need to identify the domain and range. What is a domain? In general, not in this case, what's the domain, yeah?
It's the numbers that you like for the input.
The numbers that we put in are the numbers for our input. So in this case, our input is the number of tickets we buy. What are the possible number of tickets we can buy? Seth?
6.
Okay, that's one option. 6. There's got to be more in our domain than that. If you look at the question, what does it tell us about the number of tickets we can buy? Bethany?
Buy up to it.
I can buy up to 6. So what numbers belong in my domain?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can't just say a 1 to 6 because that would include like 1.5 and you can't buy half a ticket. But you're missing a number. 0. I could buy 0 tickets. Maybe it's a concert for a band I don't really care about. Maybe it's a Justin Bieber concert.
I don't know. It's got some pretty good songs. I don't know.
You probably like turkey bacon too, don't you? Saying baby 100 times in 3 minutes doesn't make a good song. Just saying. I'm just saying. Sarah, stop dancing. Some of us have eaten breakfast and we'd rather not see that breakfast again, all right? Okay, so now we need the range, which is the set of outputs. Now, if you think about it, we need an output for every input. A, well, you could use R for range. I put A because we got amount of tickets. So our range is the cost associated with each of our domain. So if we buy 0 tickets, how much does that cost? $0. That's one of our range numbers. If we buy 1 ticket, how much do we spend? David? $15. If we buy 2 tickets, how much do we spend? Renia?
$30.
$30. If we buy 3 tickets, how much do we spend? Bethany?
45.
If we buy 4 tickets, how much do we spend?
70.
Ooh, that's 5 tickets. You skipped to 5 tickets, Yana. So for 4 tickets, what were you going to say, Sarah?
60.
60. And then for 5 tickets, Yana said 75. And for 6 tickets, how much do we spend, David? 90. So there's our range. The range has to go with the domain. We need one range for each domain number. Does that make sense? Are there any questions? All right.